Welcome to Stories of Brisco and Bradshaw. That would be Bradshaw. That would be your Chickasaw native, your Chickasaw Hall of Famer, Oklahoma's favorite son, Mr. Gerald Brisco. And we got a treat today. He is former ECW World Heavyweight Champion, former ECW two-time Tag Team Champion. He is an eight-time hardcore champion for the WWE. He is Mr. Just Incredible. PJ, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, John. It's a pleasure. Mr. Brisco, also a pleasure.
Well, thank you very much, PJ. It's always a pleasure to have somebody on like you, man, and that fellow hardcore champion. All three of us, I think, were hardcore champions.
That's right, we are. We have something in common.
I believe everybody was a hardcore champion back then.
Now, don't diminish it.
No,
PJ.
not everybody. Come on, not everybody was. And come on, PJ. Where it took a special person to be hardcore champion, and only few of us could make it multiple times. How many times were you hardcore champion, John?
I don't remember. It was like in the teens, I think. I think it was like a bunch, because I lost it back and forth a lot. Like certain shows I'd lose it and gain it back like 2 or 3 times. So apparently somebody counted all that stuff. I have no idea.
Were you guys in that god awful battle roll out in LA where Hardcore Holly was took the title and they wasn't supposed to at the end of it? The title switched about 15 times during the course of the match.
No, I didn't. Holly won it, wasn't supposed to?
Yeah, it's funny, he was supposed to do the guy, he was supposed to, he lost it, he wasn't supposed to. He was supposed to go out on the show as the champion. And it's one of those deals where he got dinged a little bit. Holly was always dinged, but he forgot to kick out at the end. And I kept saying, you can't kick out on 2.5, Bob. You got to kick out on 1. And they, oh, no, I can do it. He argued with me all afternoon, and I argued with Vince. Well, he says he can do it. And sure enough, what happened? He didn't kick out. So the next day, we had to rewrite Raw to get the title off of Bob Holly.
Tremendous. Boss Man went in and gave it back to Vince.
He did?
He did, yeah. Boss Man had, because Bob Holly was, man, he was a lot of guys were rough, but Bob was rough with, working it with it out there. But he took it the same way. Nobody cared. Yeah. Bob's a tough guy. But I don't know if Boss had worked with Bob or Boss worked with Al Snow, who was also a hardcore dude you'd want to be out there with. Boss went back in Vince's office. He goes, "You can have this belt back. I'm going to get hurt." And he gave the belt back to him. He didn't want the hardcore title.
I don't blame it. After I had it, man, I had probably the most grueling match in the history of the hardcore title when I won it, man. So that is one of the top 5-star matches of my career, man.
Yeah, you covered a sleeping Crash Holly, didn't you?
Well, thanks to you guys, yeah. But yeah, he was sleeping, and it's still hard, John, not to wake the fucker up, So.
BJ, I'm sorry. We've digressed on your show.
Please. I'm enjoying it.
Oh, PJ, welcome aboard, man. It's been a long time coming. I hate to do it, but I finally reached out on Facebook, because you never know who's reaching out to you on Facebook. And I've had a lot of people just, what do they call it now, ghost you when they don't get back to you?
Yeah.
They don't know whether it's really you. Mostly the divas, I know I can't call them divas anymore, but mostly the divas, when I reach out to them, they won't get back to me, because then when I run into them, they tell me they think I'm not Gerald Brisco.
Right, you're not, yeah, for sure.
But maybe they wouldn't reach out to me anyway.
That's not true, Jerry. Come on.
So anyway, when I finally reached out to you, I guess I convinced you that it was really me, and considered to come on. But it's been a while, man. It's been a while since I've seen you. I know you ran into John there, but not too far back at one of the signings there that we all get around to doing sooner or later.
Yeah, only like 2 or 3 weeks ago where we ran into each other. I believe it was in New York or New Jersey. It was in New Jersey, I believe. Jersey, so yeah, but
yeah. Hadn't seen you in a good grief, 20 years or more, probably, right?
At least, yeah.
That's the great things about signings. It's so fun to go to these things, to see the guys. You miss being around them.
I was so nervous to come up to you because I didn't know if you'd even remember me. So I was like, should I?
Come
But I
on,
didn't want to.
we worked together.
I know, but sometimes, man, I've been big league so many times by certain people. You don't know you know what I mean? You don't know where
I'm
people's
not
heads
big
are
enough
at.
to big league anybody.
To hell, you're not. Come on now. But
No, it's
anyways,
great
I
to
was
see you.
nervous.
I'm so happy you came by. You know, it's
I'm happy too. It actually made my day. Believe it or not, I'm not just talking smack. It really made my day, dude. You know, you're so kind and so gracious. So I appreciate it, man.
You
Seriously.
still talking about the Layfield, the same guy that I know?
Yes, I am.
Kind and gracious. Holy cow, PJ. What did he
He
give
was he was super cool, you know.
He must have gave you a payoff or something, man. I can't believe he said. But anyway, PJ, welcome aboard, man. We just like to get on here. We talk a little bit about the history of wrestling, the history of the guests we have on, and you certainly have a history. You were all over the place in professional wrestling, which is fantastic. A lot of people don't get that experience, but you weren't afraid to take that lunge and try something new, and you were successful. You held championship belts in every organization that you're in, which says a lot about your talent and you as a person there. So congratulations on that. But let's get us started here. Let's go back to when PJ. What got you into professional wrestling? What was the tipping point that you saw on TV, and what TV shows were you watching at the time that made you, man, I'd like to do this stuff?
For me, even though I grew up in Connecticut, it was the NWA. It was Dusty and Flair, 84, 85. It just captivated me. You know, it was something so different because, you know, in New York, you can't help but watch the WWF back then, WWE today, of course. But I never really connected with that when I first stumbled upon it on WTBS. It was just from then on, it was just magic for me. I was, it was just so different. I loved it. I loved the purity of it, or what it seemed to be for me as just a fan. And from then on, I just, you know, I started trying to do it in the backyard with my buddies when we were kids. You know, just kid stuff. And as soon as I graduated high school, I was working at a grocery store as a bag boy, and we'd have like 15-minute breaks. And I went into the magazine aisle and I saw one of the After magazines. And believe it or not, there was because back then there was no internet. The business was not as exposed. You couldn't just go down the street and find a wrestling school. There was an advertisement for the Hart Brothers Pro Wrestling Camp in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And I called the number. I spoke to Keith Hart, and a year later, I'd saved up enough money to fly myself to Calgary from Connecticut and trained up there.
PJ, you remember what they charged back in those days?
It was, yes, I do. Exactly. It was $3,000.
Wow.
wow.
Yeah.
What year was
Yeah.
that? What
I
year was
do.
that?
It was 1992, the summer of 92.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money for back then. You had to work your ass
Yeah.
off to save it there.
And
Was
Oh,
you
yeah.
was you
that's a huge
athletic
leap of
in
faith,
school or
right?
anything?
I'm sorry?
Go ahead, Jerry.
Was you athletic where you're in school? Did you was you into athletes or athletics or what?
I played soccer on the JV and varsity squad. I went to Holy Cross High School, which is a pretty big high school in Connecticut, but I wasn't very good. And not unfortunately, actually, I just at that time I was already so fixated on wrestling. I didn't want to give my time to anything else. I wish I would have played. Now looking back, I wish I would have played football because I really love the game today. I just wasn't inclined back then, but I wish I would have done that. If I could have
It's
done it
hard.
different.
I grew up in West Texas. That's all we had.
Right.
We literally didn't have baseball because the guys wouldn't play spring football. It was crazy.
Right.
That's all we had.
We didn't have soccer back in those days. Back when I was growing up, either. As a choice. Like a lot, like you had. PJ just mentioned. You played soccer a little bit, which really aided you a little bit later on in your career with WWE.
Yeah. Right. Amen. That's how it started. Believe it or not, I still have the drawings.
You made that long trip out to Calgary and the dungeon. I read a little bit. I guess Chris Jericho had just finished up out there, and several other potential great WWE legends were were in the making out there. Who all was out there, and then how did the training go? And was it really like everybody here? Sue Hart gets you in the dungeon. Hey, kid, I want to show you something. Tell me about it.
Lance Storm and Chris Jericho both came the year before me from the same camp. But what had happened? No, it was nothing like that. Stu wasn't even around. Basically, Keith Hart was barely around. It was almost like a third party gimmick where they used the Hart name. Keith, I think, showed up for one session, and Lance Storm was, if you want to be honest, and he'll say the same thing, it was truly the guy who trained me. But it was not easy. I mean, before we got, we'd have to put up the ring, we'd have to run miles, do, the 500 squats and all that stuff. We did all that stuff, but Stu was never around. The Hearts were never around. It's more just the myth. At least my experience was, and I think Lance's and Jericho's as well, but
yeah,
that's just being honest,
Well, Lance was not in the business that long, was he? At that point, I mean,
no,
was...
1 year,
really,
1 year, but that's all they had. They were just putting it out there, and I remember 4 or 5 guys, I think 5 guys, I say, would sign up, and that's who were there with me. And then by the end, it was just me and another gentleman who had never gone anywhere either. So it wasn't a big thing, it was really small, and I didn't know anything, man. So I was just like, they had me a room and board above a strip club outside of Calgary, right? And I'm 19 years old. I'm not even old enough to go to a strip club, and here I am, wearing my room and board, So it was just
they had apartments above the strip club.
They certainly did, where the strippers, I guess, would stay, because it was a small town about 30 miles outside of Calgary called Okotoks, Alberta, and that's the only place they could find, for the $3,000 I paid, but to put me up,
Could you hear the boom boom all night?
Oh, all night, dude, all night.
How late did they stay open?
Till 2 a.m.
So you had music till 2 every single. It didn't drive you nuts.
It sure did. But I was so young, and I was just so happy to just be there, man. I mean, because back then I don't want to sound like a grumpy guy, but these young men and women today have it so good. We really had to go I think all of us had to go through a lot of shit to be, to get into the business. And I just, I took it. I didn't say, what was I going to say? Nothing, as Davey Boy Smith say, you do 2 things, nothing and like it. And that's exactly what I did, not say anything.
That's a pretty big leap of faith, though. I mean, how old were you when you went out there?
19.
Wow, 19. That's a big leap of faith to take the little bit of money that you had, because that's quite a bit of money for a 19-year-old back then, especially, and go halfway across the continent to a place that you don't know.
And I had to pay for the flight too, which was expensive. But John, I really believed in it. I wish I had gone to college, but I didn't. It wasn't in my wheelhouse. I was obsessed, and I was a good athlete. I was by far the most athletic guy there. And I knew I could do it if I could just get the training. And again, this is before the internet, and kayfabe was still a thing. I just wanted to do it right, and I figured the Hart name had cachet, and I didn't know any better either. I didn't know that Johnny Rodz had a school in New York, an hour and a half away from me. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't either. I trained I think the same year you trained, 92. I went up to Brad Reingens, and I never met him. I cold called him, paid my $2,500, and went up there and lived. Unfortunately, I didn't live above a strip club, but I still, I took a leap. But the same thing, there was no, you didn't know where schools were.
You didn't know, and I just took everybody. I was a real innocent kid. I thought I was a good kid. I just, yes sir, no sir, believed, what they told me, and just followed the rules, man, and hoped for the best.
So you're up there. You have no transportation, so to speak, that you.
Oh wow, you had no transportation. Were you up there in the summer or winter?
Summer, thank God. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Well, I had hooked up, and I didn't even do this on purpose. I had hooked up with a nice young lady my age up there who lived in the town. And because the only thing they had there was like late nights was a gas station that stayed open with a bit of a convenience store. So I would sometimes just go grab a soda or something and hang out. And I met this girl, and she was cool, and we hooked up, and she'd help me out a little bit. She drove me around if I needed to, but everything was within walking distance anyways. And the bus would take you in and out of Calgary. There was actually a little bus that brought you into Calgary where the school was. They rented it out of a bowling alley, some spare room in a bowling alley. It wasn't the dungeon like how people think it is.
The dungeon. That was my next
No,
one.
yeah, that was a long time. Yeah, it wasn't. It was past that stuff. So they rented out some little, a little room outside of a little bowling alley, and that's where the ring was set up.
What does school consist of? Ring, mats, and weights, or just a ring?
Just a wrestling ring. Yep, just a wrestling ring.
So you had to take care of all the outside, like weightlifting and all that stuff, training, weight training.
Yeah, that was all on you. Yeah.
The conditioning there was all body weight.
Yeah, pretty much. Push-ups, squats, all that stuff. And they really, that was true though. They ran you pretty ragged with that stuff before you ever got in the ring. You'd have to do your running, you'd have to do your squats, 500 squats at least a day. Well, those are most, but still you did them. You didn't do them all in succession.
Take us through a week of your training up there. I mean, that place is such an iconic place. You hear so much about it. It's very rare that we get somebody that actually got to train there for the beginning of their career there. So I'm just kind of curious on my own. What was the week like there, and what experience did you get?
Sure. After you do your running and your squats and stuff like that.
How much running?
You'd probably do a mile. Jogging a mile.
Conditioning.
Yeah. And there was a street. It was a back street. You would kind of go, and they measured it, and you go to the end of the street and jog back, and get in the ring. Everybody together, do your squats, and and then you would they would pick something like all right, today we're going to learn how to take they would call it a front bump, which is like something they would do in a hip toss, and you would get in the line and do that, and then a flat back, you do that, and you just go in rotation, and then towards the end of the class you would work on certain holds and how to lock up properly. Like a lot of people, man, the way they lock up today is so different. Like we were taught to lead with a certain foot, to and it was a certain grace to it, how to take a headlock. We were taught that like in a proper way that, at least for me, it felt like, wow, it was just different than what I see today. So there was a lot of nuances that we went through, believe it or not, like a lot of cool stuff that to this day, I don't wrestle much, but when I do, if I do, I still notice the difference. And it's just a big, just the little things sometimes make the biggest difference. How to shoot somebody off properly. Nowadays you just tap somebody, they'll run the ropes, and that's not what the ropes were supposed to. You're supposed to, anyways, shoot somebody.
I agree. I'm the same with the lockups. You said they're different. I would say the word I would choose is horrible, but it's just,
I'm not trying to be kind, but
no. Yeah. And I am too. I don't want to bash the young guys, and girls, I'm not gonna be the
but
guy.
It's just a different world, sucks, man.
They're drawing money, doing something right, but it's the old. They go to lock up, and it's like this, and they just kind of.
Yeah, it's weird, man. Exactly. That's what you were taught, and a lot of people don't even lead with the right foot, and that's one thing we were taught. Like, you don't want to be stepping on somebody's toes when you're locking up, and we were taught too that when you lock up with somebody, if you're in there with a veteran, they'll know if you're the shits or not just by a lockup.
Just on a lockup.
Yes,
that's
sir.
Right. That's all you need is one lockup.
Yes, sir. You should know. And
we were talking the other day about Danny Hodge. Danny Hodge would go out and kind of shoot with a guy, not full blast, but he would kind of get the feel on at what level they are. Nowadays you just lock up and what level you're.
Right. Yeah, it's a shame too, because it's such a beautiful art when it's done correctly. And it's unfortunately, and again, I watch some of the product. I don't watch it all, but especially AEW, boy, I just see so much stuff that makes you cringe, man. I couldn't have got away with that back in the day.
None of us good. Were they actually smartening you up as you go along? When did you know that you're in a complete worked environment?
I pretty much right off the bat. Because again, it was
when you went up there. Let me refer. When you first went up there, did you know the business was a work when you went up there? I mean,
yes, sir.
watching the business?
No, I was, and again, I hate to say this and mention it, but I was already getting the sheets and stuff. So I was I was such a fan. I mean, this is, I'm sorry, I hate to say that and admit it,
Well, no,
but I
I mean,
did.
we're all fans.
I thought I knew.
You were getting sheets, so don't say that. I was going to the drugstores looking at the wrestling magazine. So it's basically the mags after mags were basically the dirt sheets before dirt sheets come
Right.
along.
Yeah. Hey, wait,
So
PJ,
we're
you
all
gotta
doing it.
understand,
We're all doing it, brother.
we're from Oklahoma and Texas. We didn't have sheets.
We're lucky to have bed sheets, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just such a fan. I wanted to get as much information as I could, you know. I just really loved it and I wanted to do the best at it. That's all, you know. And you know, it just provided me a little bit of an insight. But, you know, and again, you had guys like Lance there who were, you know, he wasn't very hard-nosed. He was a good instructor and he taught me well, very well. But there was, you know, it was just, again, you weren't, you know, it wasn't it wasn't a veteran who was maybe a little bitter and just, you know, kind of putting you through the mud, if you will.
Yeah.
As some tend to do, you know.
Yeah, something to do just, you know, for no reason. I saw a lot in people training people in Texas, and I thought, you know, there's not a reason to do
No
that.
reason,
There's
no.
not a reason to be mean like
Yeah.
that. You know, I understand being tough and protecting the
And I
business.
get that too, and it's a good thing to be tough. It is a good thing to be, because unfortunately, in this day and age, we don't get enough of it. But in the right form, you know what I mean. There's a way to do it. Unfortunately, you know, nowadays, I just feel like, you know, when I got into the business, and I hope you don't mind, there were still so few wrestlers coming in, you know, in the 90s. And, you know, the amount of wrestlers coming in kind of were akin to the spots available. Now, I feel like there's wrestling schools every 15 miles. Everybody's a wrestler. Anybody that could buy a ring is a trainer. And I think that really hurts the business. And there's unfortunately no way to, I've always wanted to say this and I never have. Unfortunately, there's no way to kind of bring that back, you know. It's just too much of a good, you know what I mean? And it just, you know, you don't know, you know, it's just bad for the business. Too many people being, you know, because most of those guys would be on the other side of the fence, on the other side of the aisle. They don't belong in the business, you know.
Yeah, no,
Now,
and I
while
agree.
you're up there training there, did any of the guys, the Hearts like Brett or Owen or Bulldogs or any of those guys drop by to see how? None.
No, Keith Hart would drop by once in a while. He was a fireman by trade. He worked up there, and he would come by maybe once every other week. I was there for 8 weeks total, so maybe like once every other week he would show up, and just like, you know, just basically, I think that was kind of the nod of, hey, I'm showing up because it's under the Hart name. And there was somebody else there taking there was another partner involved. I don't know who it was, but there was somebody else involved getting the money. I think Keith was just like you know, the guy to represent it, but he didn't do much, you know. Which again is no disrespect to Keith or any of the Hearts, but I didn't. I'm glad I went there. I'm glad I got the education that I did, but it was just a namesake. It was nothing compared to what it was in the 80s. Let's just
Now
say.
you mentioned Lance Storm and Chris Jericho. Were
Yep.
they there as instructors, or were they still there as students, or were they on the road? Were they working the territory full time? What was their role?
Lance was the actual instructor. He was there every day. Jericho would pop in once in a while, and at that time, they were working. They just started working FMW in Japan, or Chris did, I think. Chris went first. Lance was going to go after the camp was done. And all I know is that they both worked at some titty bar as bouncers for their shoot jobs, or I should say. But yeah, and it was, but Lance was there every day. Lance was the actual guy, and Chris would just pop in. But they were there literally the year prior to me being there, the summer of the
Could you tell on your limited experience that you were there that Chris Jericho was something special, and this guy is destined to be a star? Did he have that charisma at that time that he had developed later on?
He did, and he was just, and to further along the story, and I'll say it real quick so we can move it along, and it pertains to this question, Jerry. So just bear with me. I came home after the camp, And then in October of 92, I went back because they were starting a territory in Calgary called Rocky Mountain Pro Wrestling that would run every Friday across the street from the old Saddle Dome there. Small indies every Friday. So I, again, bankrolled myself to go out there, wasn't making any money. And Jericho was actually my 4th match ever in the business. I worked 10 weeks out there every Friday. I worked with Lance, I worked with Jericho, and those matches are actually up on YouTube somewhere, believe it or not. But it was a great experience. And yes, I could see that in Chris because he was just, the look, he had a good look. In his wrestling abilities too. I mean, he was always stiff to this day. Even when he started, he was a stiff son of a bitch. But anyways, he had that look, the blonde hair, the blue eyes. The girls liked him, so it was natural. So I always thought, like, this, if anybody, this guy is going to be a star for just on looks alone.
Yeah, and Lance, now has done a great job with TNA. He's an agent there, and
Oh, is he?
He is. Yeah, I've been
Oh, I didn't know that.
Really impressed with what he's done. I watched him, have a bunch of matches and stuff, and I always like sitting at the monitor and watching.
Yeah,
the matches.
Yeah, he loves the business. He's a good one. Lance has always been, he's a super dude, and he loves wrestling. So that's great. I'm glad.
So the work that they were doing at the time, Lance and Chris, were they working somewhere at the time? He said they're about to go to FMW, but did they have any regular shows they had? They were just up there.
Yeah, no. Yeah, nothing regular. They were just doing like small indies. A lot of times they would travel to British Columbia. There were a bunch of indie shows, but again, it was very sporadic, until these guys started doing the Rocky Mountain shows in October. And even that was in front of maybe 75 people, which was fine for me. I was just happy to get in the ring. But that's really what was available until they kind of got their break in FMW in Japan. And then I guess from there, they both went to Cornette's Smoky Mountain right out of there. So
yeah, I saw Chris when I guess it's just right after this, he did one of the junior heavyweight tournaments in Japan. And unfortunately, I was too fat to be in the junior heavyweight. So I didn't have, because it would have killed me. Because what those guys were doing was, it was
crazy.
Insane. I was sitting there and I saw Jericho was such a nice guy, and it still is this day. I remember thinking, if he can live long enough, he's going to be a star, because they were doing crazy, crazy stuff back in the early 90s. And it was unbelievable what they were doing. It was, I just remember seeing him then going, this guy's going to be a star if he lives.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing too, is I think wrestling started to have a little bit of that renaissance, and you could see it kind of in the Nitro junior heavyweight kind of thing that was going on. And even for me, even though I wasn't, I'm right now, I'm like 250, 260, I'm fat, but back in those days I was 225, about 6 feet. And back then, even that kind of size, I had to be a junior.
Right.
Because everybody was 300 pounds or 275, and so yeah, it was rough, and I couldn't be as good as those guys for sure. So but anyways, yeah.
And at Rocky Mountain, they were running in the winter as well. So how long did you work there? Because a lot of territories, like in certain places, up north, ran mainly during the summer.
Yes. They ran every day through. I just remember I was there. I could only afford to be there because I didn't get paid for 10 weeks. So I came in, and it's funny, my 20th birthday, October 16th, happened to land on that Friday, was my first match ever. So 10 weeks from October 20th, I came home right before Christmas. And which leads me into when I got to Connecticut, not knowing anybody really in Connecticut from the wrestling perspective. And again, information was hard to come by. And I just happened to go to a house show in New Haven for WWF and met up with Tony Gurria. That's how I started doing jobs. Like when Monday Night Raw first started, they needed guys, and I was here local. Business was not that great back then, so they weren't looking to spend a lot of money, so I could drive, and that's how I got my foot in the door there, coming straight from Calgary.
Yeah. And were you working anywhere else as well, or just with the WWF at the time?
Just with WWF at the time, yeah.
And were they running a bunch of shows up there?
They were, because most of the TV back then, it was Monday Night Raw, if I remember correctly. Tuesday was Superstars, and then Wednesday was Wrestling Challenge. So every 3 weeks we do they would do TVs, and it would usually be local for me that I could drive. And I mean, again, I'm living at home still as well. So that, it was just, I was just getting experience at that point, but it was great. I wouldn't change it for a thing. And a lot of people are like, because the stigma was if you're a jobber, it's hard to bring, to ever get looked at, as anything other than. But
Right.
it was either do that or do nothing, because indies weren't a thing like that either back then. There weren't a lot of independent wrestling, a scene, until later. So
Yeah.
What was your support like at home, PJ? I mean, you're living at home. You shelled out $3K plus your expenses of traveling out there and getting back. Did your parents kind of look at you and think you were goofy, or what was their reaction? What was their support system?
they at first they were like a little goofy on it, but then when they started to see that, hey, I'm actually pretty good at this. And once I started getting on that WWE TV, even though I was a jobber, it's like, friends of the family are like, hey, I saw your son. Or so it became like, okay, there's some validation in this a little bit.
Right.
So maybe there could be something here. So it was definitely cool, man. It was really cool. Good, great time. They were very good to me, my parents. God bless them. They're still alive.
Oh, good.
So yeah,
That's
very
good.
blessed. Yeah,
Yeah,
man.
people don't realize that business was different then.
Yes,
After,
it was very different. Yeah.
oh my goodness, after the big Hogan run, business really went down. And
Yes.
when I got there in '95, we couldn't give away tickets, and
Right.
we had maybe the best roster maybe in the history of the world. We had the whole NWO. We had Scott and Kevin. Brett was there.
Yep.
We had all these guys that were going to be huge stars in a couple of years, but they were all in the wrong characters.
I know, and I remember I worked with you when you first came in, when
Yeah,
you were
many
with
times.
Dutch, yeah.
Yeah,
And there was so many great guys. Even Savio, when he was doing the mask gimmick, the Quang gimmick, everybody had so much talent.
that's right.
It was crazy. Yeah, you're
That
absolutely right.
roster was loaded. Triple H was an aristocrat. Steve was the ringmaster. Kane
Yeah,
was a dentist. You just
yeah,
had everybody in the wrong characters. And
yeah.
he didn't know they were the wrong characters. Obviously, you're trying, but
Right,
and that's what you say about like doing jobs when you start. For one, we all do jobs. It's just
right,
whoever you're doing them for.
right.
But also, nobody makes it to the main event very rarely in the same character they started with.
Correct.
Most
Correct.
people think, oh, this is going to be my character. I try to tell young kids, just get in the business. Just get
Yeah.
in the business and get started. And I hate to tell them, whatever you pick to choose with, you're not going to finish with that.
Nope.
The odds are overwhelmingly against it. They're going to find something else for you and figure out what you do.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. But and again, it was also one thing, and I don't know because I'm not around the guys and gals in the locker room anymore, but it just seems like the level of respect for the business is different. I remember we had maybe it's old school, I don't know, but we had such a level of respect for the business and the towns and everything. I don't know if that exists anymore. I really don't. And it's a
Yeah.
shame because I think that's what this business is all about. There's a beauty in that. And I didn't understand it at first. Took some hard lessons to learn it. But being around guys like yourself, guys like Undertaker, Mark, and so many other great guys that you would teach you these things. I don't know if these young men and women are getting the same education. And I know everything changes, but I just don't know. Sometimes I don't see it.
Yeah, and somebody asked me the other day, when did the handshake go out? People,
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
coming in and shaking everybody's hand and greeting them. And I said, I don't know, because I'm not around anymore. I don't know. I
Right.
don't think it's there anymore. And somebody said, well, is it bad? I said, don't know. I said that was our tradition. And
Yeah, I still
kids
do
have
that
different
to this
traditions.
day.
It's
Yeah, to this day, if I go into a locker room, I'll shake everyone's hand. I think it's my right to, not my right to, my duty to. I think it's a nice thing. It's even just as you go into an office or you go into any workplace,
I
you
do
want to
too.
just say,
Anywhere I go, I greet
yeah,
everybody.
just hey guys, what's up? I'm PJ. Nice to meet you, sir.
Yeah,
No harm, no foul.
sure.
But it is what it is.
Yeah,
Everything changes. We were blessed when we got into the business. I mean, I got in obviously much earlier than you two guys, and John earlier than you, PJ. But the traditions were all the same, and they're still the same today. And all we can do is hope that even though you don't see the handshake, you hope that respect of each other. We all respected each other because we knew the rough road that everybody took to get in that locker room. And
Right.
it wasn't an easy place to get it. And you
No.
wasn't always guaranteed a spot once you got in that locker room either.
That's
You had
right.
that too. And but times have changed for everything. I'm sure football players sit around and grumble and bitch about the same thing we do. So
Right.
Of course they
No,
do.
you're right. Of course they do. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Absolutely
So
right.
PJ, when did you end up getting? Did you go straight from that to getting the job with WWE? How did that happen?
I literally went from like when I got back to Connecticut, I didn't know anybody here in the scene locally. So I got back and I was a little frustrated because I just wanted to keep working. I had such a great experience in Calgary. So I don't know what I remember Lance and those guys up there teaching me like, just go to a show and introduce yourself, let people know who you are. And I went to a WWE house show in New Haven, Connecticut, and I met Tony Gurria. And I said, "Sir, my name is," gave him my credentials. I've wrestled, trained with the Hearts, which is always a good way to kind of start the conversation.
Right.
It's not like no, I really didn't train with the Hearts, but I did train at the Hearts, sort of. And
No, it's true. You use whatever you can. I
you're right.
agree.
And and Tony was like, "Well, we don't need anybody. Of course, you always say you got your bag, all that typical BS." And I'm like, "Well, sir, after the show, he let me sit backstage and watch, and I introduced myself to people. And he's like, "Well, we're starting a new show in Manhattan called Monday Night Raw. We need some extras." And so I gave him my number, and he called, and I got booked on Monday Night Raw, one of the early ones, and I worked with the narcissist Lex Luger. That was my first time on TV at the old Manhattan Center there,
Yeah.
and that's how it started. And they liked me enough to keep bringing me back, and and I did I guess a good enough job that
hey, was that the first Raw?
yes, sir. Well, no, it wasn't the first ever Raw, but it was probably like 3 or 4 weeks into the Raw thing. Yeah. So it was really cool though.
And what was the conversation when you ended up getting offered a contract and all that to go from being an extra to being a full-time roster person? Was that with Vince?
It was with Vince. And I first started with Pat. He had mentioned, oh no, here's exactly what happened. I'm glad you brought that up. Remember when Brian Lee and Undertaker were doing the gimmick, the double takers?
Yeah, yeah.
They needed a crash test. They needed a crash test dummy in Stamford just to go, take the bumps, whatever. And of course, they paid me $150 for every day for a week. Yeah, I'm going to do it. And the last day was a dress rehearsal where Mark, Pat Patterson, and Vince McMahon came down. This was the studios in Stamford, not the office. And we did the run through, and Pat got in the ring and he was talking to me. He goes, where'd you train? Just asking me questions, and to give him all the answers. And then Pat said, "What nationality are you?" And I said, "Well, sir, I'm Portuguese." And all of a sudden he yells out, "Vince, this guy's Portuguese." I do a horrible Pat, but and then he goes, "Do you speak it?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "Hey, Vince, he speaks it too." I guess the whole time they were looking for a Portuguese guy, and this is what I've heard. I don't know if this is true or not, but that they were going into Brazil to start a new market. Even though I'm not from Brazil, I'm Portuguese from Portugal, but they speak Portuguese in Brazil, and they wanted to have this character, and they drew up. And at first, I was a soccer player. That was the original draw up for Aldo Montoya. But then they thought about this Power Ranger style gimmick, and of course, what am I? I'm not going to say anything. I'm just happy to be there, and I got that. Like everybody else, back then the 10 shows at $150 per show contract.
I loved them. I loved them.
Happy to get it though, I was happy to get it, and that's how it started, man. Just as simple.
I gotta ask you a question though. They told you you're gonna be a soccer player. How did the jock strap there? And what did you think when they first came up to you and presented you? I know I'll do anything. I mean, we all do that. We all want a break. So we'll take anything that's thrown away, no matter what it is. But there had to be some thoughts, man. What am I getting? up into.
The way they had it drawn up, Jerry, was actually a really cool looking mask. It's just I don't know if it was lack of, the seamstress, because we only had two seamstresses doing all the stuff, and it happened quite quickly. But it was, if you saw the drawing, and I don't have it anymore, I wish I did. It looked really cool, almost like Road Warrior-esque, like almost like a cane looking mask. And then it just turned into that somehow, because they had to get it quick, and it had to be able to move, and it was horrible, but it didn't look like that at first. In the drawing, at least. So, what are you going to do?
Hey, Ron Simmons got a blue helmet, so don't.
I know.
You're not alone.
I know. And I was there. I remember working with Ron in that blue helmet when he debuted. I think it was his debut match, and he wrestled in Toronto in this big show. They had this like 40,000 people at this. It's like a one night thing that they did in conjunction with the big event that they did there in the 80s. And Ron did the blue helmet, and man, he was not happy. Oh. He was not happy. But
you're right. I remember that very well too. And I remember, seeing the gimmick, and the presentation they always give the gimmicks look a hell of a lot better than the finished product usually comes out. And I said, well, I don't know Ron very well. I'd met him when he first started down here in Florida, but after that, I never was really around Ron, but I knew the quality of the athlete. And I was walking by one day, and I heard this fantastic promo coming from one of the promo rooms. And who in the hell is that? So, of course, I open the door crack, and I step in, and I see it's Ron Simmons there, and I see this goofy damn helmet and outfit. I'm the holy God. And this fantastic person delivering the lines like a Charleston Heston, man. You just shook when you heard the power behind that voice. I immediately went to Vince. I said, Vince, what the hell is that gimmick? Well, and of course, Vince sells it to me. Vince can sell anything to anybody, Don't worry about it. It'll be great. It'll be great, and all this stuff, But wow, Ron Simmons doing that stuff there. But it's like a lot of the great workers like you, you make your chicken salad out of it.
Yeah, you do what you can. That's all you can do. I rather wear the jock strap than not wear it and not have a job.
Yeah,
so
that's right. Yeah. And Ron was the same way. Ron's the first black heavyweight, recognized black world heavyweight.
That's right.
And he's got this goofy blue helmet. When Stone Cold said Ron Simmons is the only person that can wear that blue helmet, and nobody would say anything.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, that's true. He's a badass to this day.
Yeah, to this day, he's fun to be around too. Just a good human being.
Yes, sir.
They never run Brazil, because they do that.
They never did.
For people
that never did run Brazil. No.
For people that are listening to the show, we want to run India. We got Indian wrestlers come in, or same with English wrestlers. You want to run a big show over there. So it made sense that I guess Vince saw a market down in Brazil and really wanted to exploit it, but we never did end up going there, did we?
No,
we never did. And John, the whole story behind that was, MMA was starting it, and the Gracies were, the Brazil. So Brazil became a thing, and our genre of sports, And of course, Vince, wanted to tap in on a new market like that. Let's get TV down there. And I don't think we're ever able to procure a nationwide TV or TV run spot in Rio or Sao Paulo or into those towns like that down there. So I think that was the reason we never got in down there.
Yeah.
Did you ever even get to work in Portugal?
No, we never ran Portugal either, which is ironic, right? But well, because Portugal's a small market anyway.
Yeah, we ran there once later, much later. We ran there on a European tour. I can't remember what the big city there in Portugal, and ran there, and we did well, but that's when business was hot, and
Yeah, and to go all the way out of your way to go to one town where you can just go to Germany and keep it all in, from a travel perspective, didn't make sense. But I would have loved to have seen, what that could have done. But what are you gonna do? It's one of those things that just didn't happen.
Did you ever do anything in Portuguese? I mean, did you ever do any promos or anything?
Oh yeah, yep. I would do the promo in English, and then I would the same promo, do it in Portuguese. So I'd flip back and forth. Not flip.
Yeah.
I would say it, whatever words, like, "Hey, I'm gonna beat your ass this Saturday," and then I'd say it in Portuguese.
Right.
Something like that.
And was that a precursor for trying to go overseas, or was that just part of your character?
It was a precursor for trying to go overseas. I
Right.
believe. Yeah.
No,
I
Because then
think,
after-
I think also PJ Evans to enhance your character too, to show.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I didn't. I did the best I could with it, and as the opening match card babyface, especially on the house shows, I always felt that I did a good job. I went out there and had good matches, opening card style matches with everybody, and and if nothing else, I was learning. I was learning to be on the road. I was learning to be a professional. I was traveling with guys, learning the business, just being quiet in the locker room, listening to how the sauce gets made,
And you're still fairly young at this time too. You're not.
Yeah, I'm 21,
20s,
21.
right? Early
Yeah,
20s.
21, 22.
And
So I went to,
that takes a lot, the learning curve on a guy
Yes.
your age. I mean, it's tough to be out on the road at that age when legally you can't even rent a car.
right. No, I couldn't. And then that's what started. And a lot of people I get criticized for hanging out with the wrong guys like Scott Hall. But the reason that happened, and I'll tell you this real quick, I was the first house show tour I ever did was the B towns in Ohio, and they were like in the high school gymnasiums at the time. And I rode to the town with Tony Gurria and Rene Goulet, God rest his soul. I loved Rene. And,
what a good dude. I love Rene.
Yeah, great. I loved Sarge, man. But Scott asked me, "Who'd you come with?" And I was like, "Well, I can't rent a car," and I couldn't. So I came with Tony, and he goes, "You're gonna get heat with the boys riding with the office." And he goes, "Come with me from now on." So that's as simple as that. It wasn't me trying to be like cool, or I just, I got an offer from somebody that was trying, you know what I mean? And I just, okay, you could have told me anything. I would have said, okay.
Yeah.
I was just happy to be there,
Well,
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's how it started.
I was a young guy in the business as well. Coming in, I was new to WWE. I'd been, I'd wrestled, several years, different places. But coming in, the Clique was always great to me too. I think the Clique gets a bad reputation, but I don't think it's very well deserved because people like to rewrite history and talk about how things were so much animosity in the dressing room. There wasn't that much animosity. Sean and Brett didn't like each other, but that happened in life.
Right.
Otherwise, the guys were just the guys. There wasn't animosity backstage between BSK and the Clique and the Canadians.
No, and I didn't say it. And again, I have no right to say anything. I'm just quiet. I'm just trying to get by, man. I'm trying not to get my ass kicked. I'm trying not to get my ass kicked. I want everybody to like me. I'm learning the business. I'm also getting ribbed a lot, as young guys do. So I was just trying to take it all in and just survive. You know what I mean? Just to get by, and and it worked out for the time being. For sure.
Yeah, it worked out, and it's just it's funny to me how they wrote about people like to go back there and put things together. The only problem we had was we weren't making any money. That was the problem. Right. I mean, that's what was that's why people were if they were upset about something, they were upset about not making money, not because.
Right. And we were traveling a lot too. We were on the road all the time. I remember that year, I think it was 95, 96. And I made like $70,000, and after taxes, I could make more money at the grocery store. Not that I would want that, and I'm willing to take that. But again, it wasn't like these. You know what I mean? People think you're a celebrity, and you're on
PJ, I'm the same. My first year in WWE was end of 95 to 96. I made $77,000, and I worked. I think every house show, or I certainly worked nearly all of them, and by the time you pay taxes, by the time you pay your road expense, that was more money than I'd ever made. And don't get me wrong, that was great money. I was happy to make it, but I didn't put anything in the bank.
No.
And it wasn't because I was buying fancy stuff. That's just living life.
Right. Correct. Yeah. And people don't ever understand that part of it either, So that's the reality. It's the reality of it.
So then what ended up happening? Because you ended up going to WCW. So did your contract run out? What ended up happening in WWE that you ended up going to WCW?
Oh, I didn't go to W. I went to ECW right from there.
I'm sorry, ECW. I mean,
no, that's okay.
I apologize. ECW.
No, it's okay. I felt like I was starting to come into my own. I was 23, and I had some years of experience being on the road, and I was just like, you know, I wasn't making much money. Not that I deserved to, but I just went to Vince and I said, and I think this was the time Scott and Kevin had just gone over. And Scott had said to me, listen, we can, I can't guarantee you we'll do anything with you, but we'll get you paid. Said, if you get your release, we'll get you something down here. So I went to Vince. I actually went into the office, had a meeting with him scheduled, spoke to Vince himself, and I asked him for my release. And he said, well, pal, we put in, a lot of money into you, whatever, and can't do that right now. But what we can do is send you to Memphis to learn to work as a heel, and we'll bring you back up. I said, okay. So I went to Memphis, worked 6 weeks as a heel with a different character. It's kind of really the start of the Justin character. And I was down there for 6 weeks. And at the time, if you remember, Lawler was doing a program with ECW with Heyman. Yeah. And ECW was down there. And I was good friends with Chris Candido when he was up in WWE, Skip and Sonny. And Chris was there as well in the Memphis show. And he said, look, man, ECW is really kind of happening. We could, I could bring you in. We could, whatever. So anyways, got to talk to Paul. And Paul spoke with Vince. And, lo and behold, my contract went to Heyman. However that happened. But from 97 to the end of the company, I was with ECW, So...
So it was never a point where you were like released, your contract just transferred.
Yes. Yeah. And believe it or not, I made more money and people always say like, oh, he bounced checks. He bounced checks to a lot of people, but to me, he bounced me one check that he made up for. And I was making towards the end, the last year, I was making $2,500 a week guaranteed, no matter how many shows I worked. I know that's not a ton of money, but to live in Connecticut and you're doing mostly Northeast shows driving home, yeah, $2,500 a week was nice. I got a nice place. I was living good and I was very happy. So, for me, that was cool,
The beginning of ECW, you're an ECW original, and that you should take a lot of pride in when people call you that, because it's very rare that a person gets to be in the beginning of something. And but that being an ECW original means something in this business nowadays. Could you see the blueprint of what they were trying to establish with Paul, that type of salesman, where he kind of come into you, okay, PJ, this is what we're laying out, and it's easy to buy into what Paul tells you to, right?
It is easy because he's such a good bullshit artist. That's just the truth. I mean, he'll admit it, but it was good because you also got I was shown that if you have the TV time, you could do whatever you want with it, right? And I was just, he was giving me the time, so it was up to me to do what I wanted to do with that time, to a degree, of course. But WCW and WWE before the Attitude Era, this is how it kind of took off, in my opinion. They were still doing in 95, 96 some really bad gimmicks, and WCW was as well before it really took off into the Monday Night Wars. And ECW was sort of like a punk rock sort of thing. It was different. You know what I mean? It was dirty. It was grungy. They were playing cool music. There were pretty girls. It was just like wild stuff. And I think fans longed for something like that, just something different than what the other two. And that's how we got our foothold, I think. And that's, and the wrestlers were good too. I mean, they brought in a lot of
the talent there. I mean, there's nothing. You guys had the talent down. I mean, you had some future stars there.
Yeah, great. Jerry Lynn was a great wrestler who never really got.
Is a great wrestler.
They brought in Masato Tanaka from Japan. Mike Awesome, God rest his soul, was a big guy that was underutilized. It's like all the misfit. It was really the island of misfit toys that got a chance, that never really got a chance. and guys like the Sandman, and they would have never worked back in the day, and Sandman was just a drunk. I mean, I love him to death today, but he was just a drunk, and the Philly guys, the Philly fans loved that stuff.
His
You never seen
entrance,
it.
though, was freaking amazing. His
Yeah,
entrance was out. His entrance was off the freaking charts. Now,
yeah, yeah.
you can argue,
Totally.
argue about the work.
For that time, he probably had the best entrance in our business for that time.
It's fantastic. He sit out there with his cane and his cigarette and his beer in the crowd.
He was just one of them, and they saw that, and once the music stopped, then he was the shits. But still, that's our business is our business, whatever is that, you know what I mean?
And the thing about it, PJ, he knew that too.
He knew that. Yeah, he knew that. So it was just a nice time. It was a fun time. It was not stressful at all. And I didn't have to watch my back and worry about am I going to upset somebody? If I do a move, am I going to piss somebody off? You know what I mean? I was always so worried about when I was in WWE, and even not to fast forward, but even when I went back to WWE after ECW closed, I didn't go back as Just Incredible, the character, with confidence. I went back as that 20-year-old PJ, because still maybe to a fault, I always had that, keep my head down, respect everybody. I don't want to ruffle any feathers. And sometimes you can't do that in this business. You got to, believe in yourself, and you know what I mean? You got to kind of do your thing. And I wasn't, I guess, mature enough or capable to do that.
The locker room atmosphere in ECW just had to be off the wall, good and friendly, and laid back compared to any place else.
Yeah, it really was. And the thing is, and it sounds corny, kumbaya style stuff, but everybody really legitimately wanted to help everyone out. Because we were if you win, we win. And it was that kind of mentality where we all wanted to do good for each other, because we wanted to keep this thing going. Because if we keep this thing going, we could all make a little money. Nobody's going to get rich, but we could all be okay. We had a video game that came out, and we had a magazine. You know what I mean? We had action figures and stuff. So we were making strides as a small company, and it was nice. It was really nice. I loved it.
It's funny because ECW, really changed a lot of the business, and the Attitude Era, of course, a lot of that came from Kevin and Scott going down to WCW and changing with the NWO. They really changed, the business, and thankfully brought in the guaranteed contracts, which was very nice. I thank Kevin every time I see him almost, and I thank Scott too for doing that. But it was very much the similar in WWE at the time. I mean, because guys could do anything they wanted during the Attitude Era. I mean, if you wanted to do something, you're creative. You just did it. I mean, it was nuts, which would have never happened when I got there in '95. Just a couple years later.
Yeah,
really, the business really changed. It became really fun and cool in the Attitude Era, as they call it.
And I think that's I think that's the way it should be. Keeps everybody their minds going. I mean, I think when there's too much control, I mean, there should be some control. I'm amazed at what AEW is. How they're in business, I don't know. If it wasn't for Tony Khan's money, but the stuff that they do, you have all this freedom. I don't understand why you're not going out there and doing more with what you have. You have a platform, and if it was guys like you and I, or guys from our era, it would have been wide open, man.
That's right, it'd be wide open. And that's how it was in our era. We had so many creative guys who were just hamstrung by terrible characters, and all of a sudden you got carte blanche, and you see my God, look at what DX did, and for us, what Stone Cold did. I mean, it was insane what these guys were doing.
Yeah, 100%.
And it was fun. It was fun to go to work.
And that and you could see that in the product as well. Fans could see that you guys are having a good time, and if you're having a good time, they're having a good time.
That's right. That's right. If you're enjoying what you're doing, fans see that, and it's palpable. It's contagious. It permeates the entire arena. So you had a lengthy run as champion in ECW. How does that whole thing come about, and how does the conversation happen with Paul Lee?
Believe it or not, let me see if I remember this correctly. Mike Awesome he was the champion, and he had signed to go to WCW, but he still had the belt. So they took it off him kind of last minute, somehow they got it off of him at a house show. And I think they ended up giving it to I think it was Masato Tanaka for a minute. And then the night that I was supposed to go to win the belts, I wasn't even scheduled for a match. Paul didn't tell me till like an hour beforehand. And it was simply Tommy Dreamer winning the belt. And then immediately I go out there, challenge him, kick him, hit him with my finish, and win the belt. So he was like champion for 30 seconds, total Dreamer fashion. Yeah, it was
Dreamer is the best loser in sports.
he is the best, and he loves it too. I think
he loves it. He absolutely loves it. I mean, you tell Tommy could lose and get over it better than anybody human being I've ever seen.
And that's exactly what it would just, and that's what happened. It was literally like I found out an hour prior, and it was just Dreamer's going to win the belt, and you're going to go out there. His manager Francine is going to turn on him, and you're going to hit him with your finish 1, 2, 3. And I'm like, okay. I had no idea. You know what I mean? It was just, I don't think anybody had any idea, but that's what the fun of it was. I don't think anything was too serious. Like we took the shows very serious and we wanted to put on a good show, but like, winning and losing to us, like doing a job there didn't matter as much because we knew, we're sort of central figures. We could do a job and get back over in a heartbeat. That was what was cool about Paul and working for him at that time, at least. So, it was just that simple, man. It was very, it happened really quick.
What were you thinking during that time? Because you got, WCW and WWE fighting, for who's going to survive, who's going to not. ECW was a huge show, a huge brand. It still is to this day. People still chant ECW, which they never did for WWE or WCW. It's a real ownership that the fans take in that brand. What were you thinking during that time when you have this Monday Night Wars and all that stuff going on?
It was weird. We almost operated on our own little spectrum. It didn't really matter what they were doing. I mean, of course, we all followed the business and the ratings and stuff. But to us, it's like, our fans would always show up. And that's, and to add to that, the sad thing about ECW was our last couple of shows before we went out of business were sold out at the Hammerstein Ballroom. We had a couple thousand people 2 nights back to back. It's like the people were still coming. It's just we were a financial mess. We'd actually done some of the best numbers at the gate that we'd ever done that year, but just the backlash of all the years of losing money and Paul being Paul and mismanaging money finally caught up. But it was a shame,
So did you guys feel this coming, PJ? Or you were just saying?
Oh, we felt it coming.
But you're doing great business and everything. What was the word in the locker room? Hey, we're going to close down, or is there any of that
Paul,
talk?
the thing about Paul was he kept stringing everybody along, telling us that he's going out to LA to to try to find because we lost TNN, the Nashville network at the time, which we were on, and we lost that. And he was going out. He always say he's going out to LA to try to find a new TV spot for us. And in reality, he was going out there to shoot Rollerball, some movie he was in. He wasn't trying to find anything for us. I think the nail in the coffin was there. I know he had borrowed money from some shady people in Philadelphia and New York, you could say, mafioso style, where he was paying, I'm sure some interest on money to keep the company running. And I think he just got to the point where he, just couldn't do it anymore. And it's and we all stuck around for him. Everybody was there.
But you felt it coming, you guys.
We felt it coming. Oh yeah. I mean, the minute it closed down, here's how crazy Heyman is. Or crazy or a bad human, whatever you want to say. I don't like to say that, but I just had my first son was born, and I said, Paul, just be honest with me. Are we done? He goes, no, we're not done. I still have all these things in the works. Hadn't heard anything from him, so I contact Jim Ross. He was head of talent relations at the time, and I said, Jim, would you be interested? Things, Paul's not paid me. I'm not contracted to him. Would you be interested? He goes, yes, I would. And then he came to me and was pissed off that I went to Jim Ross and got a job. I'm like, bro, how could you with a straight face be mad at me? And then you know what the funny thing was? The night I debuted in Long Island at the Nassau Coliseum with X-Pac, he debuted as the commentator. And he was yelling at me for fucking betraying ECW. Like, like that's the kind of artist you're dealing with, and I don't even want to go there. But anywho, it was wild stuff,
You know what's crazy is if you guys had the internet back then, and I know the internet was coming along, but it wasn't like it is now.
Yeah.
You guys would have made a fortune. I mean,
Yes,
a freaking fortune, because you had such a rabid following. You just couldn't adhere to the standards and practices of TNN. You pirated music. You did all this crazy stuff. If it had been the internet, you guys would have made a freaking fortune.
If YouTube was around, yes, sir, it would have been.
Right. If YouTube was around, you guys could have put it on the internet. I mean, you had a following that was freaking globally, which you did anyway, which says a lot, but it would be exponentially bigger.
We would have gotten by for sure. You know what I mean? It would have definitely been a driving force. But look, it had to happen. I think, like anything like that, it has to die sometime. It's like it was a good run. I don't think something like that could be sustainable for a very long time. You know what I mean? So again, like I say, it was punk rock. We lived hard, died young.
That's right.
So
hey, but somebody told me one time, said, how was it like to be a has-been? I said, better than being a never was.
Yes,
you had your spot in the sun. That's cool. And it's still amazing to me. People still chant ECW.
Yeah.
People don't do that with WWE. People don't do that with WCW. But people still chant ECW. That's pretty cool.
It's wild, man. It's wild. But I think fans now are just it's just I don't even know how to explain it. It's just it's just a cool thing. And again, I think fans are discovering it with the internet, with the WWE network and stuff. You see it for the first time and you're like, oh, okay. So sometimes a whole different set of fans get to see it. So it's cool, man. And listen, it's helped me stay booked. God bless, and make a little bit. I don't make a lot of money, but I make a couple of bucks here and there, and I'm blessed, man. I never would have thought I would have gone this far. So,
and I tell people all the time, it's cool to be big during a big ratings time.
Yes.
You look at guys that were big, in territories or something that didn't have big ratings or weren't global, oriented companies or national companies. They were huge stars.
Yes.
They weren't lucky like we were lucky to be there when the business was, thanks to guys like Rock and Stone Cold and all these guys that, business was huge.
Yeah.
And we happen to be there, and because of that, people still remember us.
Right. And that's the beauty of it, man. And that's the power of television. That's what benefits the benefit of being on a WWE television. I don't think a lot of people understand, when you're on WWE TV, that goes all over the globe, and that's so powerful,
PJ, when you're out doing these autograph sessions that we love to do, what do people remember you as the most, ECW or WWE, and what kind of memorabilia do they bring for you to sign?
Believe it or not, mostly ECW. Mostly ECW, yeah. Yeah, Aldo, I do have like an old school 8x10, but very few. I mean, some people do, don't get me wrong, but very few people do. It's mostly the Just Incredible stuff.
Yeah. And when you come back to WWE, they end up rebooting ECW, but that was, I was there at the time. I just never.
Yeah, I know. I remember.
I just never thought that was going to work.
I remember. I was actually. It's funny. Somebody mentioned it today online. I was CM Punk's first match in WWE.
Really?
For that ECW, for that fake ECW, we wrestled at the Hammerstein Ballroom in one of our TV tapings for that, and it was his debut match. It was actually a hell of a match, but that was his first foray into the company. And I think ECW was kind of a vehicle for, not necessarily for Punk, but for guys like him. It was almost like before NXT was NXT. I think that's what the intention was.
100%. I say that all the time. Is a front runner of NXT. 100%.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
You look at NXT now, And NXT's got this very loyal, rabid following. People,
Yes.
they'll chant NXT at it. They very
Yep,
similar
yep.
to ECW. It
Yep.
just doesn't have the wild craziness. You have some wild craziness, but not the not
Right.
the profanity and all the stuff that that went with the Attitude Era in ECW. But I think that's very I've always thought that NXT is kind of a follow-up of ECW, that loyal fan base of the fans feel like they belong to something.
Yeah, and then they love that, and that's why NXT I think is so successful, is because fans feel like we're part of this, and I think and it's not for everybody. I think a small group of fans, well, a small, but I mean a chunk of fans, but not as big as the main rosters, will always gravitate to more of like, this is our thing. This is the cool kids club, or they think, you know what I mean?
Right.
And they're attracted to that. So that's what NXT is. They've got the next crop of talent, wonderful men and women there, and they're doing a great job, dude. I think they're amazing. I love watching NXT more than I think some of the other brands.
Yeah, it's fun to watch because it's fun to watch. Young people that are coming up in the business.
Yep.
And you do have some great stars there. I'm not taking away from just calling them young people that but they're a lot
Sure,
of younger people that are learning, and it's fun to watch that. It's fun to watch people learning. It's why when we're the old guys and go and see some independent show somewhere, it's fun to watch these, young guys and girls, trying to figure out this business, and
yeah. And it is fun to watch, man. And you also remember too, it's like, wow, I used to be there, I used to be that guy or that girl. And man, and it's all positive, dude. I actually miss, that's one thing I miss more about the business, is the camaraderie than the actual business. That's being in a locker room. And I don't know how it is today, but that's one thing I miss, and I hope that these guys and gals understand that that's I learned more being in a car with guys than I ever did in the ring. Just hearing legends talk about their matches, or what they did right, what they did wrong, what they could have done here. It's those car rides. I don't know if they get those anymore. That's
unfortunately, I don't think there's many car rides because they have fly everywhere.
I know, right? That's crazy. We used to.
They get a 5-minute car. They get a 5-minute car ride from the airport to the hotel or to the arena. And so
I remember. I mean, we used to have to drive anything under 300 miles.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because we would bitch when it was 350 and they'd make us drive.
And make you drive, right?
That's right. We'd go, guys.
It's funny you say that, because they would make me drive sometimes from Connecticut to Maryland, and that's close to 400, but they didn't care. Now you're driving.
That's right. And even if the flight wasn't convenient, we wanted the flight because that was our right.
Just your point, yeah.
It was just the point of, guys, I'm not driving 320. I'm not driving 320.
I'll drive 300, but I'm not driving 320.
That's right. Well, the flight sucks. I don't care. Fly me.
Yep. Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. That's funny.
So, BJ, you started the business so freaking young. How old were you when you finally decided to? I know you're not completely. Nobody ever completely retired, but get out of the ring as far as for regular work.
Honestly, when it just started to dry up, really, it wasn't necessarily a choice that I wanted to make. I mean, I'm pretty blessed in the fact. I mean, I'm 51. Right now, I don't suffer from a lot of bad, like I don't have any, I never had surgery, believe it or not, John.
Really?
I've never had a surgery. No, sir.
You never had any major injuries, right?
No, sir. No, sir. I mean, I had a bunch of concussions, but which isn't great, but other than that, like, I'm okay. If I was just, I mean, I'm fat, but if I could get in shape, I'm not saying I could have a run in a company, not saying that, but I could still perform on an independent level if I chose to. It's just not the money's not as good, and it's not worth, you know what I mean? It's just not there anymore. The people clamoring for just incredible is not there. So you just kind of go with it, right? And that's kind of what made me decide I better start planning out the rest of my life, because I can't rely on wrestling anymore. So, and unfortunately that came younger than I wanted it to be, John, to be honest.
Yeah.
Your kids are all grown now in school?
Yeah. Yeah, they're all grown. Well, my youngest that lives with me is 18. He graduates high school next year in the summer. But my other two, one graduated college. He works for a brokerage firm in Manhattan, and my daughter is out in the workforce as well. She's 21, and so I just got one more in the house, and that's it.
And you told me before, Mr. Brisco, for the 200 straight week, couldn't get on the Zoom call.
Nice.
That you got one that's about to go to UConn or going to UConn?
Yeah. He wants to go to UConn. That's his school of choice, and he has the grades for it. And luckily, we have put aside enough that we could help a little bit. So not greatly, but he's going to be okay. So we're excited, man. I've been blessed. I have a wonderful wife who I've been with for close to 30 years now, and same woman and 3 beautiful kids. So I did something.
Awesome. And again, you told me when Mr. Brisco was trying to figure out how to get on Zoom for the 200 straight week that you had gone to culinary school, which I didn't know.
I'm on.
Yeah.
He's on now.
Yeah.
I tell you what, Mr. Brisco, just stay on till next week when we have somebody else. That way you'll be on.
I
tried to. So let's talk about PJ. Let's talk about Brisco.
Well, I decided culinary school. How did that come about?
I decided to do that right around the time, like after the 2006, 2007 ECW stuff. I just was like, I need to do something, and I didn't have really, when you don't have a skill set, right? You put down an application, what really can you do outside of the business? I didn't have any qualifications. So I went to culinary school, and it's something I've always liked and something I always knew I could do because I used to love to cook. And it's a big difference between cooking for a restaurant and cooking at home, that's for sure. But I learned the ins and outs of it, and it was the best thing I'd ever done, man. I got to learn how to run the business from both sides, the front of the house and the back of the house, ordering food, taking care of menus, cooking the stuff, everything, prepping the stuff, and it's a nice skill set to have. It's not the most glamorous, but there's always need for people like that in the industry. So I just figured I'd just go into that.
You think your next step could be owning a restaurant and having your own restaurant?
I'm talking to some people, and this is just I don't know if this will ever happen, but a food truck would be something I would love to do, because that's kind of the wave of the future around here. There's a lot of good food, great food actually being served in food trucks, and as long as you have 3 or 4 good things that you could put out, whether they're sandwiches or burgers or anything like something special, put it out of a food truck. Your overhead is less, your food cost is depending is less, and the profit margin is way bigger than having a restaurant. Restaurants are hard; they're a hard sell. Almost a lot of times.
We had Jessie on ODB on, and she
has her food truck.
She's very successful at it. I think she's in her 3rd food truck.
Yeah,
she really enjoys it. She has a couple of food trucks now. I believe a couple now. I think. And she loves it. She's always in it. I see her on Facebook. Every time she's doing something, it looks like she's having a ball with it.
It's you have to know your market. That's like anything else. You have to know and do something well and focus on that. But again, the overhead is so much less with a food truck, and you can reach so many. You're not stuck in one location. You can move around, get the proper licensing, and it's just a lot better profit margin than having a physical restaurant. Because I worked with a guy not too long ago. With a great restaurant, made great money, always packed, and he had to stop, close up shop. I'm like, how does this happen? He goes, well, just the money that was coming in was not enough to run the show. And I'm like, well, that has to do with the building, that has to do with all kinds of insurances and stuff. So food truck is definitely the way to go.
Do you ever talk to Midian? Midian's a chef down in the Tampa area.
Yeah, no, I have not talked to. I have talked to him since about a year ago, but I have not talked to him recently. But I know he's doing that, and he loves it. He's actually really good, from what I hear. I hear everybody puts it.
From what I hear, he's fantastic. Yeah,
well, he's a chef in one of the most exclusive country clubs over in St. Petersburg, and he works in the country club, and so he's got
awesome.
Great location.
So Jerry, what you're saying is he's a chef in a country club that he couldn't get into if he wasn't the chef.
Exactly, and he told us even guys like Hogan, what did he say, Hogan and guys like that couldn't.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it was so exclusive that he couldn't get some of the big names into the club.
Oh wow, wow. Yeah, no, that's awesome, dude. That's the way to go too, because they pay fantastic. They pay, and I know he's very good at. When I talked to him last, it was a while ago, but he was working as a sushi chef,
Yeah.
like literally doing sushi, which is hard to do. But yeah, I'd like to catch up with him. Dennis is a great guy. I love him.
Yeah, he is a good guy. It's funny, you know, because in the BSK, you know, he's the one person that stuck out. You know, he was different politically. He was different every way in the world. You know, he always said he was the rescue pet.
He was,
Which I always thought was funny.
He was goofy, but in such a you could not like him.
You had
like,
to love him, and I
you
love
had
him.
to.
I
You
loved
had
him.
to. He's so kind. He's such a kind soul. And he was always so good to me too. Like, you know, even when people would fuck with me, excuse my language, you know, even people would mess with me in the locker room, he would always be like, everybody likes you. They're just ribbing you. Relax. You know, he's always kind. You know, so I never forget Dennis.
He and Henry both. I mean, just two good dudes, man. I mean, just two wonderful human beings.
Wonderful people, man. Yeah.
I just love seeing those guys anywhere I am. You know, it's
you always bring a smile to your face. You can't help it. You know, you can't help it.
When a guy's smiling all the time like he does, you know, he's just internally happy, and he brightens up the area around him. There, he's just a good guy. PJ, where can people get a hold of you if you're out doing these autograph sessions? Where do you own the internets, of course, and all that stuff?
Absolutely. Both on my X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram at PJ Polaco, Polaco. You can find me there. Twitter's or X is the one I use mostly, and Facebook. Just find me at Peter Polaco, my real name. But I don't do that as much, just kind of to keep up with family. But yeah, that's it. At PJ Polaco, both Instagram and Twitter.
Cool. And the Portuguese, you're fluent in Portuguese, and I didn't ask you earlier. Was your family speak Portuguese at home?
Yeah, they actually live in Portugal right now. They came into this country in 1970. They became U.S. citizens. I was born in 73, but then after they retired, you know, they just couldn't keep up here, so they sold their home and they moved to their hometown in Portugal. So they're living in Portugal actually right now, and they love it. You know, Europe is a lot cheaper, and you know, they have family over there. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I've got right here, if you can barely see it, that is my I always say my Portuguese cat, because I lived in Bermuda, and we had a huge Portuguese population there because of the ties of the islands, the way the lanes and stuff. There's a direct flight from Bermuda. So when I rescued the cat, my wife said it's a Portuguese cat, so we named it Miguel. So
that's really cool.
My Portuguese cat.
Oh, that's awesome. Very cool, man. That's awesome.
That's right.
It's really cool.
Well, PJ, hey, thank you very much for joining us. Jerry told me we had you on. I was excited, and plus it was so wonderful to see you a few weeks ago. So
yes, sir. Oh, it was a pleasure. I loved catching up with you, man. Brought me back to the good old days, man. It was very kind, and thank you so much, John and Mr. Brisco, for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Our pleasure is ours.